Welcome everyone to our Packers News pregame live chat alongside Pete Dougherty. I am Olivia Reiner, live from Green Bay. It is Saturday night. The Packers are just 90 minutes away from their showdown against the Carolina Panthers. We'll take a look at some key matchups in just a moment. However, as always, you know the drill. You've been doing this long enough, everybody. We want you to be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Pete and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. The Packers are catching a big break today against the Carolina Panthers. Running back Christian McCaffrey is inactive for the 11th game this season as he's dealing with a thigh injury. Last season, McCaffrey led the NFL in all-purpose yards. This season, the Carolina Panthers offense is 19th in the NFL without him. What are the Panthers capable of doing on offense without McCaffrey?
You know, they're still okay. Mike Davis is a pretty good running back. Our friend Eric Baranczyk watched some Carolina tape this week and said he liked the guy. And I asked him, is he as good as or better than Jamal Williams? He said he's definitely shiftier than Williams. So, this is a decent back. Teddy Bridgewater has won his share of games as a quarterback. Last year with the Saints, he did really well. And this is, it's basically a team adjusting, going through a whole culture change with Matt Rule. And they got off to a pretty good start. They've lost 6 of 7. But if you look at those scores, I mean, they're in all the games. They beat the Lions 20-0 for their one win in there. So it's not like this is a terrible team coming in. It's just a team that, was struggling getting over the top. And like you said, not having Christian McCaffrey, who's basically their best guy, that's a pretty big blow.
This is a very different offense from the team that the Packers faced last season. Cam Newton, no longer the starting quarterback. Now it's Teddy Bridgewater. The Packers are familiar with Bridgewater when he was the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. His record against the Packers, 1-2. How does Bridgewater compare to the quarterbacks that the Packers have already seen this season?
They haven't exactly faced a murderer's row of quarterbacks this year, so he's probably, towards the upper part of it. He's not a great thrower, but, he's not bad. He's not a great scrambler, but he's not bad. His 40 time wasn't very good, but he'll keep the chains moving with his scrambling, and he's been around a while. Obviously a lot of toughness is really important at that position, because it kind of permeates through the whole team, and everything that he's been through with that horrendous, horrifying broken leg that he had a few years ago, to come back from that and to still be a starting NFL quarterback, says a lot about his mindset and his toughness. So, this is not I haven't looked at his overall record this week, but I remember it being, I think it's below 500, but it's not much below, and he's a decent quarterback. He's good enough to win games in this league, and the Packers can't sleepwalk through this game like they've showed up for a couple games with really, really slow starts. And once you give a team that's an underdog a little life, let them feel like they're in the game, then a lot of times you have your hands really full.
This is also a very different defense than the one that the Packers faced last season. The Panthers cleared house in the offseason, and now they have a new defensive coordinator in Phil Snow. The Panthers' defense is 20th ranked in the NFL in both points and in yards. However, they do have some defensive playmakers like defensive end Brian Burns and linebacker/safety Jeremy Chin, who lines up all over the formation. What can the Panthers' defense do to try to slow down the Packers' high-scoring offense?
Yeah, the big thing is if you can get pressure on Rodgers, and especially if you can do it without blitzing. And Burns is a really good rusher. I remember thinking a few years ago the Packers actually might draft that guy. I think he went 3 or 4 picks after they picked. But he's a very talented outside rusher. And Chin is one of the best rookie defenders in the league this year. And as you said, they use him all over the place. He'd be a great fit for like the Raven Green linebacker role that Packers keep trying to find somebody to fill. So they're again, that 20th ranking, when you're 20th in both points and yards, that tells you that's about where you rank as a defense. 6 yards can be deceiving, and points sometimes can, because if you're put in bad positions all the time. But if you're 20th in both, you're probably, in the bottom third of defenses in the league.
One of the areas that the Panthers defense has struggled in this season is trying to stop running backs, not necessarily on the ground, but in the receiving game as well. Saints running back Alvin Kamara, who granted would give any defense fits on the ground or through the air, had a really good day against the Carolina Panthers. He had 65 receiving yards. And Chargers running back Austin Eckler had 84 receiving yards in their game against the Panthers. How likely is it that head coach Matt LaFleur might opt to use more two running back personnel groupings in an attempt to throw off the Panthers defense?
It's a wrinkle he showed early in the year a little bit, and we haven't seen much of it since then. And I don't know if he's been saving it for later, or Jones being hurt in the middle of the year affected that too, I'm sure. But it's something they could break out at any time. We'll see. I'm sure we'll see Tavon Austin quite a bit, or at least more than we saw him last week. So a lot more of that jet sweep action. And Jones, and the thing that the Packers have, even if it's just Jones or Williams, they're both good in the passing game, good receivers, good at picking up blitzes, and those guys are always hard to defend in this league, and that's one of the reasons that Jones is such a valuable player for the Packers, because he's one of those handful of backs in the league who, and we're getting to see more of them now, but the two guys you mentioned, Eckler and Kamara, excel at this, especially Kamara, where you can line them out, split them out, and they're almost like real receivers when you split them out. They catch the ball and run patterns well enough where, you cover them with a linebacker, you got a huge problem out there.
Let's head over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for some of your questions. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate it, everybody. Let's start with Bernard over on Facebook. Bernard asks something about the other phase that we have yet to discuss on tonight's show. Bernard says that the special teams needs work. Please stay in your lane, punt and kickoff coverage units. What do you think, Olivia? Well, what I think is that the Panthers have a kick return specialist in Trent Cannon, who has had a 98-yard kick return, not for a touchdown this season, however. He got very close, and he set up quarterback Teddy Bridgewater for a touchdown. What do the Packers special teams need to do this season now that they have given up 2 punt returns for a touchdown in the last 5 games?
Well, the first credo of special teams is the same as, and I've looked this up, so it's not the Hippocratic Oath, but it is a doctor's oath that traces back to, I think it was around Greek time, back in ancient Athens. First, do no harm. So that is job number one, is don't give up big plays. Don't give up plays that flip the field, that could lose you the game. That's the big thing. And then making plays from there, forcing fumbles, getting really good, flipping the field returns yourself. At this point, with the way they've played, that's got to be looked at as gravy. But just first, do no harm, which, as Bernard says, means stay in your lane. If you're supposed to punt the ball between the numbers and the sidelines, punt the ball between the numbers and the sidelines, all that stuff.
Thanks so much, Bernard, for your question. We appreciate it. Let's go over to Nick on Facebook. Nick wants to know, there you are, Nick. Nick wants to know, why doesn't defensive coordinator Mike Pettine have more trust in his good cornerbacks, players like Jair Alexander and Kevin King, to play one-on-one so they can put more guys up front? Mike Pettine likes to use quite a bit of zone. Why don't we see a little bit more man coverage from the Packers cornerbacks?
I think it's a couple things. One, I think Pettine seems to really buy into the analytics and that big plays are what gets you beat. And so this defense is really predicated on not giving up big plays. And the one thing they deserve plenty of criticism for plenty of things. But the one thing they haven't done is given up many big plays. So I think that's a big concern. And then Kevin King missed, what was it? How many games was it? 5, I think? 5 or 6? So the drop-off from him to Jackson or whoever's playing on the outside, plus with Shannon Sullivan in the slot, the drop-off from King to the next guy is really big. And so maybe that took away Pettine's confidence in playing more just a single safety deep and bringing somebody up. It seemed like last week they played a little more in the box than I remember in the previous game. So something to watch is because you both Savage and Amos it just, I don't know what you think, but it seems to me like when one of those guys is near the line of scrimmage, they're a little better at making plays up there. Savage can blitz. He's looking like a pretty decent blitzer. Amos is a 214-pound guy, which is really big for a safety, so he's a little more stout and a really willing run tackler. So it does seem like when they get one of those two guys up there, it does bring something to the defense, but of course it does also risk, because you've only got a single safety and that guy can only go to one side of the field or other. You do risk the big play over the top.
Thanks so much, Nick, for your question. Let's take a question here from Jim over on Facebook. Jim asks, if outside linebacker Preston Smith does not turn it on in the last 3 games of the regular season, is he gone next year? Preston Smith has only had 3 sacks this season, which is a big drop-off compared to last season when he finished with double-digit sacks. How likely is it that if Preston Smith can have a better few games in these final games of the regular season, that he is no longer a Packer in 2021?
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm thinking. Money is going to be at such a premium with the cap going down next year and the revenue having gone down this year. Yeah, I know what you're suggesting there, Jim, and I think you're probably right, unless this guy really turns it on at the end of the season and then in the playoffs, and it could always change. I mean, these things are always fluid, and he could have a huge postseason, and that could change everything. But they could save a lot of cash and cap money by cutting him in the off season, and if they had to make that decision right now, I would think that's the way it would go.
Thanks so much, Jim, for your question. Let's go over to Mike on Facebook. Mike wants to know, how important is it for the Packers to get the number 1 seed in the NFC? The Packers have not performed well coming out of a bye week in the past few years. The Packers are currently in the race for the top seed in the NFC. They are getting closer each week. Now they're technically tied with the New Orleans Saints for that top seed if the playoffs started tomorrow. However, the Packers do have the tiebreaker because they beat the Saints this season. How desperately do the Packers want to have that first seed, which would give them a first-round bye in the playoffs and home field advantage throughout the playoffs?
It's something you definitely want. It's not essential to making the Super Bowl. I mean, they won it in 2010, and they played all their playoff games on the road that year. And Aaron Rodgers has historically been, let's say they play in a dome, he's historically been a really good dome quarterback. So if they would have to go to New Orleans to win, I mean, he usually plays well in those circumstances. But the big thing is, 1, you get the extra week to get healthy, and 2, anybody that wants to win the Super Bowl has got to come through Green Bay and play here in January, which, not the most inviting thing for the world. You look at the main contenders; they're all West Coast or South or Southeast teams. So it's I don't know if it's a huge advantage, but it's an advantage, and so yeah, it's worth it's definitely worth selling out for to try to get. And you play like they go in that last game knowing that if they win, they get home field. You play everybody and you empty your playbook and do what you have to do to win that game.
January football at Lambeau Field doesn't sound very pleasant for any team, especially any road team coming from a warm weather climate. Thanks, Mike, for your question. Let's go over to John on Facebook. John wants to know, is there any chance that there's a running back AJ Dillion sighting tonight? Dillion was on COVID-19 reserve for about 5 weeks. However, he was activated this past week, and he was active for the game against the Lions this past weekend. He did not play really very much. I think he had like a few special team snaps, no snaps on offense. How likely is it that Dillion sees some offensive snaps tonight?
I mean, if by sighting you mean, 2 or 3 snaps, yeah, I could see that. And if they get up, sure. But nothing they've done this year suggests it would be any more than that. He missed a lot of time. Now he's been back practicing for several weeks, and he finally suited up last week. But we've heard Matt LaFleur threaten multiple times this year that the guy's going to play, and he really doesn't. He gets out there for a couple snaps, and that's about it. So guilty till proven innocent, right? I got to guess no until they actually do it.
Let's go over to our friend Michael over on Facebook. Michael wants to know, staying in the same vein about the running backs, who will have a more successful run game tonight, the Packers or the Panthers? The Panthers featuring running back Mike Davis with Christian McCaffrey inactive. The Packers featuring running backs Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, and potentially AJ Dillion. The Panthers have the 13th ranked run defense in yards, 19th in touchdowns, and 19th in yards per attempt. The Packers' run defense hasn't fared all that well this season. However, they're coming off of a game against the Lions where they held them to about 51 rushing yards. Who is going to have the better run game tonight?
Well, if I had to bet, you'd bet on Aaron Jones being a noticeably better player than Mike Davis, so I would go with him. And LaFleur is showing that he's pretty committed to running the ball. Now, you never know. They have all those can plays, right, where Rodgers gets 2 or sometimes even 3 play calls, and he determines which one when they get to the line of scrimmage and see what the defense is doing. So maybe a lot of those end up changing runs to passes or RPOs where he throws the ball instead of handing it off. That could always skew things, but he seems to buy into the run game too. So, yeah, if I were betting, I would bet on Jones and Williams to have the bigger day of the two. Although if Carolina, you would think to have a good chance to win this game, if they run the ball really well. I think back to, Philadelphia coming in here in the middle of last season and winning a game. And a lot of that was Miles Sanders just running it right down the Packers' throat. If Davis can do some of that today, then that really improves. That's Carolina's best chance to win in my book.
Thanks so much, Michael, for your question. Let's go over to our friend Eric. Eric, good to see you over on Facebook. We'll see you in the press box shortly. Eric wants to know, do you think that the Packers' offensive line can handle the Panthers' attacking defense, which is headlined by defensive end Brian Burns, who has 6 sacks this season? The Packers' offensive line will be rolling out what is the 6th combination that they have been working with over the past couple of games, with Elgton Jenkins at center. Right tackle will be Rick Wagner, left tackle David Bakhtiari, Billy Turner at right guard, and Lucas Patrick at left guard. That is what they've been working with. How confident are the Packers in that group of offensive linemen going up against the defensive line of the Panthers?
Oh, I think they feel really good about their line, even when they're missing people. One guy that I forgot to mention earlier was I think it was the 7th pick of the draft. I think Derek Brown was the defensive tackle from Auburn. That's a really talented player. I'm guessing that's one of the guys Eric is referencing here. He's a potential difference maker. I'm not sure he's been that so far this season a lot, but he's a really talented guy. And another reason, as we've talked earlier about when you're deciding where to play Elgton Jenkins, there are reasons, even if you think he could be a really good starting right tackle, to keep him at either guard or center, because you got to block the Derek Browns of the world too.
Thanks so much, Eric, for your question. We appreciate it. Let's go over to Steve on Facebook. Steve wants to know, who gets more targets tonight, wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling or Equinemius St. Brown? Valdes-Scantling hadn't been targeted much over the last couple of games, and then against the Lions, he was targeted 6 times, had 6 receptions for 85 yards. How likely is it that he is the more productive receiver over Equinemius St. Brown?
I don't know. What do you think?
Possible. I think he has been having the more productive season. St. Brown had gotten off to a bit of a hot start over the last few games until he left the game early. I believe he'd been dealing with some injuries. He had was in concussion protocol a couple games ago. So who knows, Pete, but what do you think?
Yeah, because a lot of games, I'm sure you got to be privy to the game plan to know what they're really trying to do, but I'm sure even the game plans often go astray. And I think with these guys, you got Devontae Adams, he's going to get his targets. He's going to get 10 or more. And then Lazard's probably going to get the second most, but I think you kind of don't know because you've got Tanyan in there, and then you've got MVS and St. Brown. And I think it's partially just who's got the matchup on any given play. And, Rodgers is generally going to just throw it to the open guy. And he seems to have more trust in all these guys than he did a year ago, all these other guys. So it's really kind of a week-to-week thing on who's gonna jump out and be the next guy. But really, it's almost getting to the point where Adams is the top target. I don't want to overstate it, but I think you can make an argument Tanyan's their next best target. That's not an overstatement. I think he is their next best target. So, it could be any of these other guys who could end up getting, in any given week, could end up getting 6 or 7 or 8 targets and maybe even that many catches too.
Anyone can be the star in this offense. That is what makes it so unique. We will see who the star is tonight. Thanks, Steve, so much for your question, and thank all of you so much for joining us. Ryan Wood and I will be live to wrap up the game tomorrow morning, so make sure you come back here. I'll make sure to post it on social media exactly what time we'll be going live tomorrow. We'll wrap it up, and we will chat with you very, very soon. For Pete Dougherty, I am Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.